Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art2Life podcast. I'm super excited about my next big project. I've been working so hard on this. It's going to be our second annual immersive Art of Your Life workshop. It starts Monday, March 3rd and goes till Friday, March 7th. And I would love all of you to come. And by the way, this is totally free. And in it, I'll be teaching the first steps of my new Bloom practice and 3 essential art making principles that's going to take you and your art to the next level. I'm just super excited to share this with you. And as a result, I'm going to be taking the next few weeks to focus on this new project and sort of resharing from our archives pivotal conversations that not only led me to the discovery of what I'll be teaching with you in the workshop, but are the ones I feel you will need in preparation of attending it. So first off, if you'd like to be on the wait list to join the free workshop, the Art of Your Life workshop, all you need to do is go to artlifefree.com and I will send you an email when this thing comes out and you'll be on the email list for that. So moving ahead, so I'd like to start today with this extraordinary episode about neuroaesthetics. This got my wheels so turning, and it's with 2 of my friends and now best-selling authors, Ivy Ross and Susan Magsamen. This conversation gave me the scientific proof to what my lifelong teaching on art and life has been, and was really instrumental in the development of the Bloom practice, which I'll be sharing during the upcoming Art of Your Life workshop on March 3rd. So I hope you enjoy this. This was a game changer for me. Okay, hey everyone, and thanks so much for being here at the Art2Life podcast. So excited to have 2 guests today, Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross. They've co-written an amazing book called Your Brain on Art. And you guys, this feels like the book to help understand ourselves, right? This is a book to help understand how art transforms us. It's on neuroaesthetics. We're going to dive all into it. But these guys have so many accolades behind them and have so much to talk about. And so I just got to introduce them first. Okay, so Susan Magsamen is the founder and director of the International Arts and Mind Lab and the Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, where she's a faculty member. She's also the co-director of the NeuroArts Blueprint with the Aspen Institute, works with both public and private sectors using art and culture-based evidence-based approaches in areas including health, child development, workforce, innovation and rehabilitation, and social equity. So, and we have Ivy Ross, and both of these folks, just as a spoiler alert, they're both friends of mine and we've done art together and have all of that. And reading these, their backgrounds, it's almost intimidating for me. But anyway, Ivy Ross is the vice president of design for hardware at Google. And I'm just touching upon a few things. You guys are so much here. She's been head of product design and development for all these amazing brands like Calvin Klein, Swatch, Mattel, Bausch & Lomb, and Gap, contributing author to numerous books, including the Change Champions Field Guide and Best Practices in Leadership and Development and Organizational Change. So much here, but she's also an artist. Her innovative metalwork and jewelry is in, 12 collections of international museums. She's been the winner of the prestigious Endowment for the Arts grant. And anyway, she's, both of these guys they're artists, they're creatives, visionaries, and just crazy creative explorers. And I just think we can kind of start there. But this book is amazing. And we're going to need a definition of neuroaesthetics for everyone here. But maybe we can just start. First, welcome you guys.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. So we got Ivy here in the studio and Susan beaming in.
It's
Susan,
great
where
to
are
be
you?
here.
Where are you?
I'm in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
Yep.
So either one of you can start, but maybe just for us listening, just give us a sort of what are neuroaesthetics, and how did each of you kind of come into this study and inquiry?
Maybe I'll jump in and
Okay.
then, great. So neuroaesthetics is a tremendously big word, right? And every time I hear it, I think, whoa, that's pretty impressive. But it's really, when you get down to it, it's really the study of how the arts and aesthetic experiences measurably change the body, brain, and behavior, and how that knowledge can be translated into specific practices that advance our health and well-being. So we call the field neuroarts, and we call researchers that are researching in neuroaesthetics. And that's really a good way to kind of think about it. So it's easier to kind of talk through neuroarts.
So in terms of how we both got into this, is that what you'd like to know? Well, Susan, I get many LinkedIn requests, and I see this one from and usually I go delete, and I see this one from the Arts and Mind Lab. And it's like, that blows my mind. It's a science lab. I know.
Arts and Mind Lab.
Yeah. And it's from Johns Hopkins. I'm like, what are they doing with the arts and our mind? And so I went, yes. And then we made a 30-minute call, and which Susan opened up by saying, I've been following your work for 25 years. And I said, that's called stalking. And she said, hear me out. And then a 30-minute call went into 3 hours, because when she told me what she was doing, which was using neuroscience to prove what I know myself, and I'm sure you and a lot of everyone watching this knows, is what the arts does to us, our brain and body. And so at first when she told me, I said, I know that. And then I'm like, oh my God, no, but most people don't. And this is so amazing. This is so important. And so Susan was asking me, maybe you want to talk, Susan, what you were calling me about. Tell folks.
Sure. So in our lab, we have something called the luminary scholars, and these are people that do extraordinary things in all these different fields. So we have playwrights, and we have musicians, and we have authors, dancers, researchers that have been studying different types of art forms. And I invited Ivy to be a luminary scholar because of the tremendous biography that you just mentioned and all of the things that she's thought about in terms of design. We also share a love of play, and I'll say a love of curiosity. I started a company called Curiosity Kits around 1988, and Ivy had been working at Mattel. So that's when I first became aware of Ivy's work when she was at Mattel designing toys for girls and thinking about play and what did play really mean. And, there's a lot of 4-letter words in the world. Play and arts are two of my favorite. And and so we really aligned on that. And I wanted to tell her about this work because my intuition told me that this was something that she would be interested in.
Yeah. And so we created at my home here in Mill Valley, a salon and I don't know where you were. You must have been away, because you would definitely have been in that list of artists. It was like Noah's Ark. I
remember this. Yeah, yes.
It was like 2 painters, 2 dancers, 2 digital artists. And then Susan brought down some of her neuroscientists, and we sat in my living room and really had a discussion of has the arts ever changed your life? And in what way did it change your life? And after that incredible couple of hours salon, Susan looked at me and said, I've always wanted to write a book on this. Do you want to do it with me? And I'm like, oh my God, this is the book I've been waiting for.
Wow.
And that's really how the adventure began.
Wow.
And one of the things that
So
one of the things that was so extraordinary about the people that told their stories, every story was different. Every story could have changed the way their lives, the trajectory of their lives. And I think for me, I work in the profession, so I work with arts practitioners, I work with researchers, I work with policymakers. But what had never happened, and what I think this book is a way to bring this information to everybody. So it's written so that anybody could read it and get something from it, whether you are in the field, whether you're an artist or a designer, or whether you're someone who just wants to use this work for your own lives, to enrich your kids' lives or your family's lives or your community. And so we thought it was really important to try to write it for that purpose.
I was amazed because, and I'm just so excited, and so much of my whole existence has been confirmed.
Well, you are
reading this book.
You're the poster child. Art to Life. My God.
Right, and so I have been doing this work, but I didn't have any science. I didn't know. I just had my experience and the proof of what occurred with people becoming more alive. Everything that I teach is what you are. It is now. This is the science behind it, and it's incredible. And I just love that this is going to make it so much easier for people to understand and access and believe.
Well, feeling seen and feeling validated is one of the most important things we each strive for in our life. So you're done. Drop the mic. No.
Well, I'll add that I also think that from a science point of view, we're just catching up to you, right? The artists have always been there first. You've always understood this intuitively. So what science is giving you just another way of knowing what you already knew that might be able to be used in service of humanity. And so in another way. So how might you think about dose and dosage? How might you think about how often someone wants to dance or understanding the transfer? Your work, Nick, is so interesting because it turns out that visual arts is something that transfers the skills and processes and all the things that you teach your students, transfers into other parts of their lives. And that's the holy grail in learning. That's what you want. You want things to go from one domain of your life to another. So you don't have to keep relearning things over and over again. And I think that's an extraordinary finding.
Yeah. So your brain, what I've learned from Susan is your brain changes and makes new connections with all of these things that you're creating on canvas or making. And those new neuro connections or synapses are used in maybe the way you approach some other part of your life, even though you may not be conscious of it.
I love in the book you speak of the value of daydreaming and what can occur when you're just making your art and your mind is released. Then problem solving starts to occur and all kinds of solutions start to rise up. And it's just an amazing, and I love how you were going to describe your book as, I think the title was going to be the 20-minute daily art practice or something.
Yeah.
Because little and often, and I have a daily art practice. So the whole thing just has been fabulous to read about. But
well, the outcome when people ask us why we wrote the book, the truth is we wrote the book so that we would like to see people, just like science is now convinced us that we need 20 minutes of exercise and 8 hours of sleep. We want this to convince people that you need to do 20 minutes of art a day, at least, or being either the maker or the beholder. So if you're not going to make the art, at least engage in being the beholder of the art, 20 minutes a day, and the health benefits are huge. So, but you guys who are out there doing this all the time, you're in great shape.
Well, it's interesting because we are, most people listening and us artists are trying to make a thing. And what I discovered in trying to help people make their thing better was there was a life component, and Art2Life was, I just knew there was more here. I didn't know what exactly, but it was a huge question mark for me. And that's why I just said, well, this is going to be called Art2Life because there is so much leverage that I am just starting. It was like wonder to me.
Yeah.
So this book goes a long way as to explaining it. And so maybe we can start there with, so what is going on exactly? I mean, a little bit, and I love how you break it up in the book, the aesthetic mindset. And maybe that's how we start there with these, qualities of being, being playful, being curious, but maybe sort of like how. I was really curious how or why do we get well-being from making art and being creative and neural, all the connections that are occurring, and what is that is there a way to sort of summarize it for us?
Well, I think let's start by talking about the neuroaesthetic mindset, because I think that's really an interesting place. Most of us go through our lives and we're very transactional. We're very purpose driven. We're moved from A to B. We have a lot going on. And that doesn't allow us to really let the world in around us. So something as simple as noticing your sensory experiences, as being curious, or exploring things in a playful way, or making and beholding. And making and beholding can be as simple as singing in the shower, or doodling, or, driving in the car and singing to the radio, dancing, on a Friday night. This doesn't have to be high art in order to really qualify as making and beholding, right? And so just opening up yourself to this idea of an aesthetic mindset brings that level of joy and, I think, engagement and even a sense of purpose and meaning into your life. And that's an easy thing to do. The way that our brains work, in terms of thinking about why these sensorial experiences are so important. We bring the world in through our senses. That's the only way we're wired that way. That's our mechanisms. Our machinery is to bring in through smell and taste and touch and sound. And so we bring the world in through these particular mechanisms. And those mechanisms engage neurons that we're born with. We're born with 100 billion neurons. Think about that. That's like stars in the sky. But those neurons need to be connected. And it's these sensory experiences, and I'll even say these salient sensory experiences, that help the synapses, the connections between the neurons, get created. Those creations, in turn, those connections create what we call neural pathways. And those pathways are what help us learn, grow, move, think, create, all of those human attributes that we know of that are sort of amplifying our potential. So when I talk about something like a salient memory, or salient experience, what that means is the things that are important to you, that you remember, either because they're emotionally important or because they're very practical. And each of us have our own saliency. So what might be important to me, a song from my childhood, or a color, or a smell that's like the chicken dumplings my mom made, that's going to be my salient experience. Your salient experiences are going to be different, like Ivy's are. But collectively, those experiences are what make us each who we are. And the arts are some of the most salient experiences that we have in our lives.
Especially when you can, in making a painting, go deep into the colors you love or the shapes you love. Those are salient experiences, right, Susan? Because you're feeding yourself more of what your brain wants. And so it's almost like going deeper into that. The first thing from having taken your class that I love, that is one of the things we talk about, is no judgment. Because what happens is, art, which is the art of creative expression, right, no matter what your medium is shut down often because people are told in school they're not artists, or it's not reinforced. And so what's super important, and that's shut people down from doing any of the arts or being expressive. But at the end of the day, the ability to take what's inside and put it out there is huge. And then I think this concept of salient experiences, which is where these new connections are made and old ones are pruned, thrown away, is a way to keep diving into what's important to you. Now I know why, quite frankly, and you've been to my house, I have pieces of art that I collect that it's not about what it's worth. I don't care if I ever resell it, but looking at it, and now I understand why. Whenever I walk by it, there's something about it, even in abstract, that relates to me, that is a part of me that I feel or I see when I look at this piece. And so I've learned through this exercise with Susan about salient experiences, that I realize I surround myself with not necessarily things that I've made, but things that other people have made that speak to me in that deep way. And then every time I interact with that, my brain is bringing me back and connecting me with that which makes me stronger. So it's incredible, because this exercise of writing this book with Susan has taught me even about why I buy certain pieces of art.
It's so interesting because as creators, as artists, the way in, the almost reverse engineering of how I approach it with people is first and foremost for them to become more connected to what they love, to be involved with things that bring them joy or that meaning. And when you do that, it just turns out that whether it's, you're going on a vacation or you're gardening or whatever the things are, or it's art making or the colors you love or the people you love or the art you choose, that creates the quality of an inspirational, joyful feeling, inspiration, and that there is a reaction, a chain reaction to creativity. You almost want to make a thing. Mm-hmm. It's like overflow of energy. And I love how you talk about in the book, this is all energy, which I got to dive more into, but it is that energy. And so what you're saying, Ivy, is so true. If you create something that is a more clearer communication of what you desire or what lights you up, those on the outside, and this is the clue to how to sell more of your art or to understand it, is they're walking around just like you were, looking for things that they don't necessarily understand, but they just say yes to.
Yeah, and
they're salients. What's in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
What? I don't know. I don't even understand this art thing, but I just want this in my bedroom, and they bring it home.
Yep. And the clearer that communication can be, the transmission, the more likely it hits someone. So I always say, like, I like humans who are fully who they are. I mean, I like art who is 100%, it doesn't hold back because it goes so deep, and so pure without altering for, what they think the market wants, or it's a pure expression of from my heart to your heart. If we're in resonance, right? And if we're not, we're not. But that's when something grabs me, is when I feel that I said, oh my, I have you literally used the word that, I don't know why I bought that, but it resonates with me deeply. Yeah. And now I know it's because it brings back one of the salient experiences I've had in my life that is so ingrained in my brain that it's like food, right? It feeds me, I guess, is the way I'd say it.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the idea that you will attract, therefore, you put that out in the world. You might not get everyone, for sure not, but who comes, they're committed and they'll buy the darn thing.
Yeah, the purity of that versus what I call Melba toast of trying to appeal to the masses. It's very different. I mean, we wrote this book to appeal for the masses because many people don't know of some of this information. But I think when you're doing a piece of art, you got to put that aside. And it just has to be you.
It's also true that what we're talking about is living an aesthetic mindset, right? We're literally talking about how do you bring the world in? And if you're expressing your true nature, just the fact that you're expressing your true nature has a benefit for you individually. And I think we don't often allow for everyone's true nature to come through. What we do is we say there's a lane. You can kind of be neutral. You can be a little sad or a little happy, but you can't be like 100% yourself. And I think this is a space where the more you are yourself, the more we can see diversity and the range of human emotion. That's so important. Like we're not all one thing, right? We're not all one kind of flower, or we don't see the flower in the same way. So I think the more you can open yourself up to that. The other thing I was going to say is that, a lot of schools are using art to help people look at art and look at things in non-judgmental ways. So there's a woman in the book in the flourishing chapter named Meg Chisholm. She's a psychiatrist, and she trains doctors to look at a piece of art and not to judge it, but just to see what's there, talk about what's there. So what do they see? What does another person see? What does another person see? And they don't judge it. They just keep listening. And the point of it is that we all see something different when we look at a painting. So even if I'm trying to express something in a painting, that may not be what someone's getting back because of their own experiences. And so opening up our minds to the idea that there's a lot of ways to view something depending upon where you come from, and they're all relevant and they're all valid. And so I like that too, as from a beholder's point of view, is that let the beholder see what they want to see too. I think that's a really great lesson.
Yeah, and not to worry, therefore, when you're making the art, right, about what's this person going to be feeling like when they see it. But, one of the things, and there's a quote in the book from Julie Bolte Taylor about we think we are, we're feeling beings that have learned how to think, not thinking beings that feel. And I think that we all walk around thinking that we're thinking beings first, because our mind we're in our heads, right? And actually the universe designed us, we are actually feeling beings, because as Susan said, everything comes in through our senses and then it goes to our brain. And so if you start to think about, turn it on its head, ever since I heard that quote, it changed my world, because I realized we are feeling beings first and then thinking beings. And you start to walk around with this more sensorial nature, being conscious of the sensorial nature of things. And 95% of what we take in goes into the unconscious and only 5% into our conscious mind. So when we are making something or expressing something and we're in that flow state and it's coming from our unconscious, that's actually coming from more data, because it's 95% has gone there, than this 5% of the cognitive mind. So it's an incredible well of information. And so the more, I think, we talk about, the more you walk around in this aesthetic mindset, taking things in, it's like having antennas and noticing everything. I thought people used to walk around and think the way I do, and then you learn that no, not everyone does. But I'll walk into a space and I notice those flowers, or I'll notice the detail over the door. I can't help myself. And so I realize now that's all data that's going into my brain that will come out through when I'm designing, a product or critiquing something, or when I'm making something. So I would say, and I think most artists do this, but it's so important. Now I understand the reasons why it's so important, that we are attuned to that, because it enriches every possibility.
Another point that's worth making is, Ivy makes this great point that we're feeling creatures that think, not thinking creatures that feel. And a lot of times we may not know what we feel, but we talk before we feel, right? We think before we feel. And there's some great work in the book that we talk about this area of the Broca region of the brain, where sometimes there are no words. You really don't know what you think, because you may have trauma experience, or something may just not have processed for you. And so you can create a collage. In some cases, people make masks or paintings. By looking at the symbolic representation, the metaphoric story that you're telling, and it might just be abstract color, you can then understand what the feeling is and put words to the feelings. And that's more authentic than trying to think your way through to something, because really you'll just get trapped in that spiral of words and trying to logically understand something that's really a feeling. And when you figure out what that feeling is, then you have a way to solve it. Then you have a way to transform. And I think that's something that we forget too, is that processing data takes time, and it really is sort of raw data that we're processing. And so if the arts can help us get that out in some form, that then we can then come back and add a different kind of narrative, whether that's verbal or written or any other way, that's a gift.
Which is why it's so beautiful in your class. I remember, when you see people who have never painted before, and I was one of those people, you get intimidated to even put something on canvas, but there's this extraordinary material that you may not even realize was in you.
And I love how, and I use this, well, as a troubleshooting, looking at your art or actually anything in your life, a really easy way in that anybody can participate in is, well, what does it feel like? Or what do you want it to feel like? Or how do you want to actually feel? I love that question, because then we can start. Maybe we don't understand, but I can look at someone's work or my own, and I can say, well, that corner, I don't know actually what's happening there, but the feeling is right. or I felt a certain way when I was making it, and I want to do more of that.
Yep.
And that's enough. Just moving towards it, little steps.
Yeah.
But so this is all energy, right? I mean, could you break that down a little bit? I mean, color is there's light waves, there's energy. We feel a certain way. I help a lot of people in their making of their art, how they feel when they're making art changes what they make. But the book does a really great job of coming back to this again and again, and it's measurable, it's just kind of magical to me, the whole thing.
Yeah, I always say that too. It's the closest thing to magic, which I love. It depends on the art. It depends on the sensory system, and it depends on the art form, what's actually happening from a neurobiological perspective. But at a very sort of high level, we bring in these sensorial systems, and they get translated into electrical impulses or vibrations. So I'll use smell as an example, because it's a great one. Everything in the universe is made up of molecules, and in scent, those molecules that come into your nose and get stuck in the mucus are molecules of a particular type. I think we have over, oh gosh, it's a huge number. It's like 400 different types of scent receptors that we can actually decode, and over 1 trillion odors that we're able to understand. So think about that, 1 trillion odors that our noses can understand. And once these molecules are in the mucus in our nose, the neurons that are connected to the scent receptors have something called an axon. It's the longest part of a neuron, and it actually attaches to the molecule and brings it back to the olfactory bulb, which is in our brains. I know it's amazing, right? It's like we have all these little mechanisms. Like,
it's great we don't have to think about this as we're smelling everything. It just happens on automatic pilot.
Like this, it happens so fast. It's amazing. It's just extraordinary. But we have an area of our brain called the olfactory cortex, and it's in the temporal lobe of the brain. And that's the part of the brain that actually affects things like emotions and memory. So it makes sense. You smell something and you might remember and feel something about your grandmother or the horse that you rode when you were 10 years old. But smells instantly and potently trigger physical and mental neurobiological responses. And it's through just that molecule that comes in through your nose. So each of our different senses activate different parts of the brain. So the motor cortex is activated by movement. The occipital lobe is activated by vision. Touch activates the somatosensory cortex, which is in the parietal lobe. And that's, we have so many sensorial receptors. I think there's 700,000 sensorial receptors in 1 foot. So information about the world is coming in all the time. And just to pull that back to what's salient, we couldn't possibly process all that information that's coming in. And we couldn't make sense of the emotional responses that all of those sensorial experiences we're receiving. So the other part about saliency is it edits out for us what we know is not important. So what you pay attention to is what you also think is salient. So, how you drive home sometimes, and the last mile of the road, you don't know how you got home because it's really not important to you, right? You don't have to pay attention because you've done it a million times. It turns out that that's where most car accidents happen, is that when you're not paying attention, it's that last mile. But your brain is basically saying, I don't need this anymore. But it is so precise at what it wants to pay attention to and what is salient and what isn't.
Well, I always say pay attention to what gets your attention, because that tells you something. But color has talk about energy. Every color has a different wavelength and transmits a different frequency. And I used to have a teacher in color that in sound, light, and color. He would have us stare for an hour he'd make a big disc of 1 color of orange, and we would just have to meditate, just stare with our eyes open at that color red, and then talk about what we were feeling from the transmission. And it's interesting because Susan and I talk about this, and that some of that transmission is cultural, like what red might mean in an Asian country. Here it means stop, there it means money. So that definitely comes into play. But the energetic transmission that you get from certain colors or combination of colors and how you feel, it's all very personal. So it's not, when someone says, like we did an experiment at one of the first projects Susan and I did was at Milan Salone, a big design fair in Milan, Italy. And Google sponsored it. And we did it it was really to prove neuroaesthetics and to prove that our body is feeling all the time. And we had 3 different rooms, living rooms. And each living room, we worked with our architect friend, Suchi Reddy, was a totally different vibration in terms of lighting, color, textures, the art on the wall, the music, the scent. And we did people put a band on that they wore that had sensors, and Susan's lab and Google worked to create an algorithm of taking those, the physiology of your body, and creating an algorithm as to in which room was your body, not your head, least stressed or most comfortable. And the idea was people stayed in each room for 5 minutes, no talking, no technology, just being. It was called a space for being in the room, sensing the color palette, the textures, the scent, the music. And then at the end, we took the band off, downloaded the data, and of course deleted it because it's Google. And we gave the participant back that data and showed them in which room, by this beautiful kind of ink blot test, their body felt the most comfortable. And we thought, and then we gave them a list of what elements were in that room where their body was the most comfortable. And we thought this is going to be a disaster if the room people liked or thought they liked, their body liked as well, because the point was to prove that our body's feeling all the time and it might be different than your mind. So sure enough, I think it was 56%, it was over half the people had a different reaction. They walked into a room and maybe the living room, and they liked it because cognitively, because it reminded them of a living room they saw in a magazine or their friend's house, but their body was feeling, and it wasn't feeling comfortable in that room. And so we were able to show the difference. So the idea was to basically let people know we are embodied beings, remember, because I think we forget, and that we're feeling all the time, and we have agency over our environments. Yeah. It's like, and there are some things that don't cost a lot of money, to have certain color flowers in front of us in our environment. We may think that's a small thing, but our sensory system, our body is loving it and wants it.
It's like the operating manual for being an artist, being a creative, thriving human being, which
absolutely
is not an artist or non-artist. It's just, this is what we need. We need more all the time. We're soaking it all up.
And more of what makes us more. The interesting thing was at the end, people said, well, what was the right answer? Which is the room I'm supposed to like? And we were horrified because it's like, oh my God, no, this is about you. There is no right answer. And it's the same thing with a painting, I feel, and there isn't a right or a wrong. It is what works for you. Like Susan said, what I may find beautiful or salient, you don't. And I learned from Susan, which I hadn't realized. I mean, it's like a duh, but yeah, that our brains are as unique as our thumbprint. We kind of think, well, if we went to the same school and had the same experience or shared the same boyfriend, we're probably the same. And it's not the case. We are each our own. Our brains are 100% unique, like our thumbprints. So this idea that we have to constantly inhale more of ourselves, I love that, because it gives us permission to say, get to that place of figure out what makes you more you.
And that's a question that, what I love about that inquiry is that nothing can stop us. It's not in an encyclopedia somewhere. You already have this information. It's just paying attention more. It's an internal inquiry. Mm-hmm. And the question of which room do I prefer is a little like, and this is a question that I get all the time. I don't know my style. I got to figure it out. I mean, Diebenkorn had a style and I don't know my style. And they're looking around for something that's going to hold, but it's like, you already got it.
It's inside. Yeah.
You already got it.
Yeah.
Good news, bad news.
You have to unfold it, which is different than not have it at all, right? I think that's the interesting. Well, you were talking about flourishing earlier. And I think one of the things that's worth saying about flourishing is that it's really a muscle that you get stronger when you use it. So that's really important. And there's attributes of flourishing that help you do that. So you were touching on awe. Awe is certainly an attribute of flourishing, but so is wonder and curiosity and enriched environments. We think creativity, rituals, novelty, and surprise. And I think you use all those things when you're creating art, right?
Yeah, and because I've worked with Nick, and when he says those exact words, where's the surprise? Like, even within the painting, sometimes he pushes you to look at the painting from that perspective, so that the painting is flourishing. I just realized.
Yes, and this is what's so amazing. The painting is just the artifact of this flourishing way of being.
Yes.
I mean, great art comes from flourishing. It's a byproduct. And we always, I'm trying to help people make amazing art. And we can get overly focused on the end result and how do you do the thing. And we need to learn these colors and everything, but it's reverse engineering it a little bit. We need to learn to flourish. And then what comes out is going to be very personal, authentic.
Yeah. Or great art can come from despair, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's like learning how to tap into what's inside that wants to be expressed. And this, through the adventure of this book, I mean, it's so clear that for health, we must express what's inside. I mean, I think we get in part ill sometimes when we've been taught not to express ourselves, from when we're little, like hold back. Because when we don't, we have micro traumas all day. There's big traumas and then there's micro traumas. And we hold them in, and then they explode. One day we have in the book, there's an example of a woman from Art to Ashes. It was training frontline firemen coming out of fires, immediately giving them a paintbrush and having them paint to get out how they were feeling, instead of taking, they had a trauma because they couldn't save someone they left burning behind. And then they would take that trauma home with them to their family and act out on it. But when they were given the paintbrush or to start making something to express themselves immediately, that got out on the canvas. And then this 25-year-old fireman we interviewed went home and he was fine. And now he's training other fire houses how to make, how to paint, how to art, and again, it doesn't have to be good. It's the fact that he was putting how he was feeling down on canvas that released that.
I never understood until reading this book or thought of it this way, that in the book, you guys speak about how, there's feelings and emotions, which is really interesting. I never thought about the difference, and I want to touch on that for sure. But also that it's not that, we have all these great emotions and hard ones and difficult ones, and it's not wrong. You're never getting rid of that. The problem is they get stuck.
Yes.
And that there needs to be emotional movement, which completely makes the painting is such a great metaphor, or art making, because it's actually moving through the thing.
Yeah. And emotion is energy in motion. I think it was InQ that said that. There's a poet that opens up the flourishing chapter, and and it just is. Actually, John Boyer said that also. It's kind of a known fact for some people and I love that. If you think of it that way, that emotion is energy in motion, and we are wired to keep that dynamic, the energy going through our body. And when it gets stuck, we get stagnant, and that's how we can get sick partly, right?
Yeah, no, it's really true. It shows up in a lot of different ways in a lot of different art forms. The first responders are so interesting because some of them painted, like Aaron, who's in the book. Mm-hmm. Others doodle. Others do metal work. Others, find that welding is really important. Others weave. So they all find their own medium also. And I think that's really interesting. We also found that Ivy was talking about like releasing things. there's a researcher in University of Texas, Austin, named James Pennebaker, who studies expressive writing. And what he finds is that people that write down a secret into their journal on a piece of paper, they may rip it up, throw it away, burn it, but the act of getting that secret out of their brains lightens their cognitive load and allows them to have capacity for other things. I would think the same is true with painting. If you're getting an emotion out onto a canvas, you're lightening your cognitive load so that you have capacity. And we only have so much cognitive load. I always say to Ivy, I can't talk after 6 o'clock at night because I have no cognitive load. And every time I do, I always regret it. And I always come back the next day and say, afterthought, because I can't think anymore. Well, that's true for everybody. And to be able to lighten your cognitive load through expressing yourself is just makes so much sense.
Nick brought up, do explain, because I remember it was fascinating, the difference between emotion and feeling or something. What happens first, right?
Yeah, how we go, emotions come first, and then we have feelings about the perceptions of the moment. I mean, that just amazed me. Actually, this morning I was working in my sketchbook and I was thinking about the color choices and I wanted to bring in an emotion. I really got clear about I want to contribute to this thing that was kind of drab, an intensity, a more fiery emotion. And I used a lighter, very vibrant yellow in a dark area that was dull. And it was just such an interesting way to think about art making and color choices and the feeling of it, or then that creates an emotion for me.
Yeah.
That then kind of keeps me going and gets me excited.
Well, I love what you do, the practice, because I remember even at the house at Sea Ranch is when you started this idea of in your book, right? Every morning.
It's the 20-minute daily art practice.
I know. You're a poster child, because I'd wake up and grab my coffee and Nick was already there with his pastels and his crayons. And every day he would start the day by doing this page in the diary. So it's a beautiful practice.
And I really think of this, one thing that I'm doing now is, if I'm getting up and I'm a rush and I've got this interview and all the things, I'll just paint the page a color, which takes 2 seconds because I know the value. It's literally 30 seconds. Choosing a color, adjusting the color and putting it on brings me into it is such a rich experience, as well as studying the notes and making sure that the plants are watered and then I lock the door. It changes my whole, it does have a profound effect on how I go out into the world.
Yep.
It's kind of amazing.
And didn't Sharon Salzberg tell us that, making art is the same thing as meditation? I mean, in terms of the presence, when you make a piece of art, you have to be present. And so that does a lot of the similar things for your brain that meditation does, right, Susan?
Yeah, what Sharon talked about was she felt that the arts were one of the highest forms of meditation, that, there are many ways to meditate, but that creating art was one of the highest forms because it required you to really be so embodied and so present in what you were doing.
Yeah, the great thing about this book is we interviewed, just so you know, we keep mentioning these people's names, 100 different people. Yeah. I mean, we did it during COVID. And because I didn't have to commute down to Google, which is, it was 3 hours of my day. So from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., we would interview people either in the arts, yourself included, or scientists, just a real range. And then we spent the next year, it was like weaving a tapestry together of all of these interviews to be informational about the science, but do it through storytelling and people. Yeah. So when we throw out people's names, whether they're scientists or artists or like the woman doing Art to Ashes, that's where it's coming from, is the book is delivering the information, but through story and through information.
As well as all these studies and the work. You mentioned a woman, I believe it's in England, who studied thousands of creatives and had, actually tracking well-being connected to art making. And
so, yeah, that's Daisy Fancourt.
Yes,
and what's interesting about Daisy's work, what she did was epidemiological studies. So she was looking at large data sets of generalized populations. And what she was able to do was, when she analyzed the data around the arts, she took out things like age, race, gender, income. So she really tried to take out all the variables that would impact sort of the results of her study. And what she found was that people that do one art activity a month, on general, live 10 years longer. So life expectancy grows. She found that kids that make art make better decisions. They stay in school longer, they go to school more often, and they have greater life choices as they move forward, which makes sense. She also found that when young moms are using art with their babies for things like postpartum depression, they do better than moms who aren't singing with their babies. And so Daisy's done a number of studies. She's now doing it in the United States with a similar kind of data set to look at things around youth mental health or neurodegeneration and the role of the arts and aesthetic experiences in how and the data's there, right? So this is not saying we think this is going to happen. What she's doing is mining the data and saying, this is what happened. This is the behavior that happened, and these are the results of those behaviors. So epidemiological research is one kind of knowledge, like neuroscience is one kind of knowledge, like public health data is another kind of knowledge, or anthropological data. So it gives us another way to come at how the arts transform us. We think that there are as many as 34,000 distinct emotions, and those emotions are what we feel first. And then that turns into what we're calling feelings. And so, and emotions can range from things like joy, sadness, acceptance, disgust, fear, anger. There's a huge range of those emotions, but that's what gets translated into feelings. And then what gets translated.
34,000, Susan? I don't know.
34,000 distinct emotions.
Can you imagine trying to write that down one day? That would be an art piece in itself, writing down what those 34,000 emotions are.
And
get going.
And a life goal to just experience all of them, like one a day, and you could maybe fit it in a 50-year life.
Yeah,
because you're going to live till 180,
yes.
Based on Susan's statistic. You probably could do that, figure out the 34,000 one a day for us.
Well, and one of the experts, or someone you mentioned in the book around this, he organized them. So there was 8 general buckets. And I wanted to ask you, because it was like you said, acceptance and joy was one, and there's 8 of them there. But I was curious because love wasn't listed, and I wondered about that. But is that joy? I mean, is that an emotion? Is that a feeling? And
yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I know a lot of people talk about love as not being an emotion, like happiness, that it's a combination of emotions. So, when he speaks to this idea of emotion, there's so many kind of combinations and variations. But I don't know. That's a really good question.
We should ask. Maybe love is a complex combination of things. Because if it was one thing, it may be easier to find. But when it's a complex system, actually,
happiness is not there, which I think is super interesting too, right? Like, what is happiness?
Well, joy maybe is the catch-all for love and all the rest.
Happiness I can see is a combination of a number of things that has to be in place for you to be happy. But Susan has a great love story about which relates to neuroplasticity with Rick and the kiss.
I'm still fixated on, is love an emotion? And I'm just going to read this really quickly. Love is a secondary emotion. Love is an emotion that combines often 2 of the primary emotions. So love is an emotion, but you often have to figure that it's a manifestation of something. And that love, love might make you feel trust, and trust is an emotion. So that's interesting.
A combination. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
This is the sequel to the book, of course. Just saying.
And there's a lot of different kinds of love. There's romantic love. which is interesting. There's just a huge range of what we think of as love. It's a complex mental function. So that's interesting. And even includes memory. Yeah, I think that's a sequel.
I
Okay.
thought one thing that I remember that hit me was that we will remember, and it relates to art making. That's why it hit me, that if you can connect, or the emotional potency of the thing you make, if someone experiences emotions, they will remember it, right? Like we remember songs, and I've thought about times where I've made art and I was nervous about it, but whatever the emotion was, it often was a piece that people would buy or relate to more, or, that we are hardwired to connect to emotions.
Yeah. So if there was more emotion in it, whether it was torment or, or despair even, I mean, that's why there's some pieces of art that you could just feel what's being transmitted. It doesn't matter whether, it could be joy, it could be happiness, it could be despair, but it's that transmission that comes from the creator having been pure, like we said in the beginning about it, that you feel.
Yes.
Makes me think of, we have a section in the book talking about trauma. And we have an artist who painted, Ivy, how many images that Judy painted?
It was like the Judy. Do you know? It was like
Judy,
36 images, and it was a great exercise because she had met her husband, who was a Hopi Indian, and the irony is he wanted to learn how to paint, and she said, do what your ancestors did with the cave paintings, no judgment, just start to tell a story and then paint over it, whitewash it, just like in the caves or something, and don't worry about it. And she hung up the phone and she told us, and she said, and I thought, wait a minute, that's a great idea. And she got out of the canvas, and she had a lot of childhood trauma, and she couldn't, and she was not a painter. I mean, she had never painted before. She was an English major, but she started to just started with a brush and cans of paint, and then luckily she documented, she'd take a picture of it, and then she put white paint over it and did another, and the progression of when you look at the images, and we have a section in the book where we show her images, like over the, 100 days or whatever, the storytelling that was there of her emotions, and she relived the emotions as she was doing these paintings. But then because she whitewashed after each painting, I saw it was beautiful. She called it the white painting was, you walk up to it. I'll talk about energy. All it was a white texture because there was lumps and bumps because it had all the stacking of paintings underneath it. And you could feel the transmission of that energy. I mean, it's funny because sometimes you go to museums, and in the 50s or 60s, there was a artist that would do just a white canvas with one gray line, but it was pristine, flat white, and it was true minimal art, and I wouldn't get anything out of it. It was white, but you could feel all the energy and emotion stacked and layered under that white canvas.
Yeah. It's like Joan Mitchell's work. You just walk in a room and you're like surrounded by feelings of gardens and space and storms, and you just feel it. And Judy's work is just extraordinary in that way.
She wrote, I dove deep into her. Well, you told me about her a long time ago, so I know of her, but she wrote, art has taught me that an image can be a transformative gift of healing. Art has taught me that what we see is only a fraction of what is there. Art has taught me that the longer I make art, the greater the mystery. And art has taught me that walls and doorways are the same thing. It's just, she just blows open the window, the exposure to art. It's not a thing, it's your life, and people can feel it. It's really something.
Yep.
So the healing aspect of it, I love that quote, if art doesn't make us better, then what on earth is it for, by Alice Walker, that you have in the book. I've never heard that, but it really is. It's something we do first for ourselves, and then for the rest of the world. And there's a challenge that artists have, I think, to give this to ourselves, you know?
Yeah,
right?
the gift of first doing it for us, right? And then seeing how the world reacts.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that's the only way to be. That's why I love art exhibitions, because someone's put it out there, and then it's really for someone to come by and resonate with it. And you can't get upset. You know, there may be, like you said, 1 out of every 40 people or every 10,000 that, but if they deeply connect with it, I remember the first piece of art I ever bought. I was in a gallery. I was in my 20s, and I literally stood in front of it and I wept. And I was in my 20s. I was a student, and the gallery owner came over and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "This language, I don't know what it is, but it's speaking to me in something I've been there. I don't know what it is." And it was $500, which at that point was a lot of money to me in my 20s. Like, I was a student, and she, cause she said, you know, I said, "No, I can't buy it." And I left. And then like a week later, I'd come by to visit it. And it was this deep, deep ancient connection to whatever that thing was telling me. And she ultimately, the next time I came back, she said, "You know, I spoke to the artist, and if you want to pay $50 a month, you know, we'll do that, or $25 a month." And fast forward, this artist, it turned out to be now this like Dominic DeMar. It was a piece of sculpture that used twisted paper, and it was a 3-dimensional piece, but he's very famous now. And that was such, I guess I'm grateful that that's my first encounter with it. Maybe that's why I'm so passionate about this area, because what she did for me, like, she acknowledged what she was seeing in me, and she made it possible for me to live with that piece. And, you know, I'll never sell it. I don't care that he's famous. What I cared is that it spoke to me, and it reflected back to me a piece of me that I didn't even know existed. And I became curious to understand why. And over the years, I have understood what that hand-dyed twisted papers really meant. So it was a beautiful discovery. I think that's what great art does, right? It's a two-way thing, because not only does the artist get to express himself, but then the viewer or the owner finds a piece of themselves that they hadn't found before.
That's so beautiful. And it's really the invitation of the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Meow Wolf, you know the work of Meow Wolf?
Yes.
I think that's another great example where you don't also have to wait to get invited into a gallery, or you can actually start your own thing and share your own work. And, you know, Meow Wolf, I think, exemplifies that. Artists who have something to say that came together and are doing extraordinary work, surprise, novelty, exploration, taking us other places, helping us sort of see what's possible. And that started out of really nothing, right? And now it's grown dramatically.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, it was a group of street artists in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and they ended up buying a bowling alley and taking it over and creating these it's more experiential art, where you walk through. It's digital and analog, but what it does is it gets you out of your cognitive mind. And, you know, Susan and I talk about a lot of the art of the future is not only just paintings or flat, it's where you're going to be walking into these spaces. And again, with the mission, I think, of getting you out of your cognitive mind and into your senses. So it's really about what enlivens your senses. And I think there'll be many art forms. And again, like we said, it's personalized medicine, right? It's what do you need?
And how to see things in new and different ways.
Absolutely.
Going through that Meow Wolf, suddenly the refrigerator that we just think of it as a place you open it to get your hard-boiled egg, becomes a doorway into another room, a chamber. You cannot help leaving that experience seeing more possibilities.
Absolutely. It's the word possibilities, because it's like, it's all in service of possibilities. And I think where we are as a society, we need to amp up our imaginations to solve the world's problems. So I think it's actually a very creative time. I think we're going to be really moving into, as a society, a much more creative time, because we are going to collectively need to exercise our imaginations. And so I think art will play a bigger role. And we're thrilled. Originally, we thought this book would be out a few years ago, and it's like, no, it's not good enough. And we kept at it, and you realize that everything is just perfect. The timing is perfect, because I think that the world needs the book now more than it would have 3 years ago.
Yes.
And there's so many other worlds. That's the other thing, is that going through the refrigerator door, virtual reality is another world. Fiction is another world. And I think creating these new worlds is what Ivy's talking about too. And the capacity to be agile and to be innovative and creative happens our whole life. It starts when we're very little. And I think the more we bring this work to children and we get kids starting to have permission to create past third grade, that's also really important. And as we're aging, I was at a retirement community recently, and they have a fantastic studio. And I said, well, how many people use the studio? The work is beautiful. And they said about 5% of the population in this facility uses the art studio. And I said, why? Why is that? And they said, because they've never made art before, and they don't think that they are going to be able to be good at it. So giving people permission at any age to make and to create, they have thousands of dollars of kilns and art and materials, and it's for 5% of the population who are exquisite artists. But that's not what art is at its truest sort of democratizing sense.
I love in the book you talk about that it's the artists that create the culture, and it's not those experts. It's us individually expressing who we are. That's the culture. And then the culture creates the community.
Absolutely.
And the community creates a humanity. It is so important and pressing for us to step into creativity for the future of the planet.
Yeah, I just got the chills when you said that, because that is the lineage. That is what has to happen. And that is within our control.
Yeah.
So keep on making art.
You guys, this has been so inspiring. We went way over, but that's fine, because this is such an important, well, I know you two have to run, but yeah. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
Your book is...
Thank you.
Again, it's your brain on art. And for those of you guys listening, head on over to art2life.com. Click on podcasts. You can see link to some of these artists that we spoke about. There's a link to get the book. There's a little yellow tab if you want to ask a question. You can record an audio on the website. And if you have some questions here, I have so many questions that we still didn't get to, but yeah.
And actually, we'll give you to post our link to our website, which has a place where we want to collect stories, a place to collect stories about how art changed your life. Because I think, we want to gather those stories.
Yeah.
And I have to say thank you, seriously,
yes.
My God, Art2Life, right? And life is art. And you have taught people that and showed people that, and thank you. You've done a great service to humanity.
Thank you. Now
I think you got it right. It's your art on your brain, right? I think that's what the book should be called.
Your art on brain, your brain on art.
Your brain on art, how the arts transform us.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we'll see all you listener folks. We'll see you next week. And really, thanks so much for being here. And again, thank you guys.
You're welcome.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.